If Kentucky's going to beat Ole Miss this weekend, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to have to play perfect or they're going to have some fourth down miracle bomb like they had a season ago.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we're going to be talking with Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, to break down Kentucky versus Ole Miss this weekend, a game that I truly do believe, despite Kentucky not being very good, I think that they can find a way to win this game and upset the Rebels for the second year in a row. We break down how that could happen on today's show. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. You can take control of your finances with Monarch Money by using code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, would greatly appreciate it if you did so. If you are listening on podcast, please, if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star review. It would be greatly appreciated. All right, without further ado, let's get to our conversation here with Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
First SEC edition of Thunderdome. I'm Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss. He is Lance Dawe from Locked On Kentucky, and we're the first conference game of the season. Everybody is hoping, honestly, that Ole Miss slips up and Kentucky can do it again because that's such a funny ha-ha story. But Lance, I don't think this is last year's game.
Yeah, it's looking like it's going to be trending in a different direction, right? I mean, Kentucky, compared to where they were a season ago, I don't necessarily know if the juice is there. I mean, it wasn't necessarily there a season ago in Oxford, right? It was a major upset, but this year it does feel a little bit different, especially whenever you actually talk to the fan base. Things just kind of seem apathetic across the board here. Fans are just kind of done with where Kentucky is at currently as a football program. And Ole Miss, man, they've got some new blood in there. Looked really good against Georgia State. It does not have the same vibe. Now, is there opportunity for an upset? Sure. I think that's the reason why this line is not significantly higher. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that you could point to this game being competitive or close, but as far as vibes and aura, it's definitely not the same as it was a season ago.
Yeah, it's amazing to think of, but the last three matchups between Ole Miss and Kentucky have been decided by a combined 7 points.
Yeah.
3 points last year, 3 years, 2022, and then 1 point, that missed extra point in 2020. It's absolutely nuts.
It's been a blast, man. You know, it's actually, I think I talked about this a few weeks ago, and then I talked about it on yesterday's show about how fun this game has been. And I honestly probably should have discussed it a little bit more whenever we were talking about, conference realignment, or excuse me, not conference realignment, the schedule realignment, adding that 9th conference game next season about who Kentucky's opponent should be. I think Ole Miss fans would probably want to go in a different direction. But as far as Kentucky goes, I would not be opposed to seeing the Rebels on the schedule every year just because it provides such fun every season.
Yeah, and before, whenever the SEC had their extremely weird schedule in the previous, it was Kentucky's permanent opponent was Mississippi State, if I'm not mistaken.
It was, yes, it was. And, I did say that if I had to pick a third, it would be Mississippi State, just to kind of go back to where we were, right? I wouldn't be opposed to the Rebels, though. State, all due respect to them, Kentucky has seen some really competitive, hard-fought games against the Bulldogs, but based on what we've seen over the last half decade or the last 4 or 5 matchups of this game, if you're looking for quality football, if you're just looking for something fun, a competitive contest, I would pick the Rebels most of the time. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the only problem that would Kentucky have in that situation would be the Arkansas game is the drunk uncle of the SEC, and that would be the 3rd conference game for Ole Miss permanent. And there's no way that anybody wants that to go away because I don't know, you could find out that JFK Jr. is alive and in the stands in that game, and nobody would be surprised. It's just it's an Ole Miss Arkansas game. Of course he's there. Yeah. So that would be the hang up of what was going on. Anyway, the storylines of the game, the big one is the fact that Ole Miss has a lot of turnover. coming into this season. They have a brand new quarterback. I think he's going to be very good. The earlier you can get him, the better. So that's probably better for Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops has the ability. He had a matchup advantage over Jackson Dart. I don't know what it was. He just knew how to handle Jackson Dart. So many teams struggled with him. Mark Stoops could kind of handle that. But Matt Corral in 2020, he was 24 of 29 for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. And him as a passer, he kind of goes real similar to Austin Simmons, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about it before we hopped on here. Austin Simmons, man, you could probably dive into this a little bit in a little bit more detail, just about his path and his story here with the Rebels. I'm really impressed with this young man. I mean, 19 years old, getting really close to graduating. Kid can.
He's already graduated.
Already graduated. Wow. Okay. He plays baseball for the Rebels, if I'm not mistaken. He looks legit. The offense that he was running against the Panthers, I mean, that thing was humming. It was pretty, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, he throws a really pretty pass too.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that Kentucky fans are going to notice is like, man, it just looks different coming out of that guy's hands. And
Yeah.
I'm interested to see exactly how he develops, because Mark Stoops, if we're going to be honest about it, has the ability to put quarterbacks on skates from time to time.
Yeah, and I think that is, one of the big talking points heading into this matchup is what does Kentucky have as a strength, right? Obviously, one of the bottom tier teams of the SEC right now might be at the very bottom. What is a strength that they have? What can they do in this game to affect Ole Miss? And it's probably going to come from that defensive line, I would guess, and that's going to do with a lot of that's going to do with what Mark Stoops and Brad White, the defensive coordinator, want to dial up here. Is can they put some pressure on Simmons? Can they put some pressure on this passing game for the Rebels? And if they can do that, everything kind of stems off that. Can they cause some chaos? And honestly, that's kind of what happened a season ago, right? They were able to kind of defensively keep things at bay. They were able to hold on to the ball, able to kind of grind that game out, make it as dirty as possible. We'll see what happens here if Kentucky's able to actually inflict any sort of will on the Rebels like they did a season ago. But yeah, that is absolutely the biggest thing for me is, can you affect Austin Simmons? Can you affect this Ole Miss offense? I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. It's the only chance I think that they have of staying in this game, though.
All right, when we come back, we are going to get into some players from both teams to watch, some people you need to keep an eye on. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast and the Locked On Kentucky podcast. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Before we continue our conversation with Stephen Willis, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. And as an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same, from metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes every day drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big time plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season, guys, is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer, because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet. The player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in as the live action unfolds. It keeps every single game exciting, whether I'm watching my team, Kentucky Wildcats, the Atlanta Braves, what have you, or just keeping an eye on my fantasy lineup, which I will 1000% be doing starting tomorrow. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
All right, we're back in Thunderdome, and we are talking about the Ole Miss Rebels versus the Kentucky Wildcats. And it's funny, Lance, our friend Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC decided to try and trigger me a little bit, and he did an episode about how Kentucky is going to beat Ole Miss this year. And I'm sure that he probably is getting some clicks trying to build up that game. I just don't see it. Everybody knows about Austin Simmons. Like before the break, you were talking about it. He graduated high school, and reclassified 2 years forward. He already has his undergraduate degree from Ole Miss. He is a redshirt sophomore with a graduate patch on his jersey. That's absolutely nuts. And he is as close to a football professional. He was like raised to do it. I think Lane Kiffin talked about way back when Todd Marinovich at USC and all of that. And he said, this is a similar type situation, a little bit different with David Simmons and all of those guys, but this guy was brought up to do it. I think he's going to be a guy. Kewan Lacey has a chance to be an absolute stud. One advantage that Ole Miss has this year that they didn't have a year ago is a running game, potentially with Kewan Lacey. And if Ole Miss can get the running game going, that's how you get that Kentucky defense tied up in knots a little bit. And defensively, Ole Miss did not move Suntaram Perkins around during Georgia State. They hid all of that stuff. We know that Pete Golding is going to move him around. This is the leading returning sacker from last season in the SEC. I think he's someone to watch because this is a game, as weird as it sounds, Kentucky winning last year, this game is on Lane Kiffin's radar. And they spent time in the offseason, extra work, breaking down Kentucky's defense and offense. And the last time he did that was last year against Arkansas and last year against Georgia. So that's something at least to fall back into the back of the brain.
Yeah, we know how that Georgia game ended, obviously, in Oxford a season ago. And yeah, definitely some big-time players for Ole Miss to watch. It's interesting to talk there about that Ole Miss running game. That's something that I've not even discussed here on the show yet, just about what happens if Ole Miss can run the football, if they're able to do so to average or even good effect. I mean, that's definitely going to put Kentucky out of sorts defensively. It will open things up in that passing game for certain. There are some players to note here on this Kentucky defense. I'm going to give you two here. There's a lot of different guys I could go to here, but I'm going to go to Alex Safari first and foremost. He had 13 total tackles against Toledo, a sack, 2 TFLs. The kid has just been all over the place. It's like a hybrid linebacker, defensive back tweener type guy. He is really, really solid in coverage, really solid in the front seven. He is all over the place, just a freak athlete. We'll really be excited to see what he does in the NFL. He's kind of our all-around jack of all trades type guy. He's somebody that Ole Miss is going to have to watch out for, both in the running game and in coverage. And then also a pass rusher here in Steven Souls Jr., who had 2 sacks against Tucker Gleason and the Rockets last weekend. Kentucky's pass rush, actually, if I'm not mistaken, had the highest PFF grade of any team from week 1, which to me is shocking. I mean, obviously they played really well against Toledo. I didn't expect it to be that good analytically. But that is kind of what Ole Miss is looking at here. It's Safari. It's guys like Steven Souls getting after the quarterback, David Gusta as well. You've got a lot of different pieces here on this front seven that can cause havoc. Will they be able to do so against Ole Miss, who, again, like we've been talking about, is significantly more athletic, is more talented, is better coached than what Kentucky saw in week 1? It's going to be a step up significantly in terms of what you're looking at on that offensive line and who's actually blocking for the quarterback. But this front seven, I think you could look at a number of players, but Afari and Souls are the 2 guys that I'm looking at going, man, if they can get going, if they can stay comfortable in this game, if they cannot get out of position, it's going to cause some problems for Ole Miss across the board. And then on offense, like you mentioned, Zach Calzada, not very good last week, 10 of 23, 85 yards, 1 pick, average 3.7 yards per attempt. I said this on my most recent episode. Look, if he's going to play like that again in the first half, I think Kentucky should pull him. They should pull him for Cutter Boley, and that may change up what Ole Miss wants to do. I don't necessarily even know if he's a player to watch, because what I think Kentucky's going to try and do is run the ball. It's going to be Seth McGowan and Dante Dowdle. Dowdle, a transfer from Nebraska, had a $129 and a touchdown last week against Toledo. McGowan had 78 yards.
From Picayune, Mississippi.
Yes, sir. On a little bit more efficient running. I think Kentucky's going to try and play ball control. We'll talk about this later on in the show. But I think on offense, forget the offensive line, forget the quarterback, forget the receiving targets. There are none for even Kentucky fans. They aren't out there. Forget Josh Caddis and Willie Rodriguez. Like, you've got 2 tight ends leading the room right now. Until other players show their name statistically, don't even worry about it. What you should be concerned about if you're an Ole Miss fan is whether or not Kentucky can establish any sort of consistent ground game. Because if they're able to do that like they were in spots last year, it's going to be ball control, milking the clock, playing time of possession. And that's not a spot you want to find yourself in if you're a Rebels fan against Mark Stoops. That is if they're able to do so. But those are the players I think that you need to be looking out for most notably. I'm sure it feels like every time I do any sort of crossover, there's going to be some random player that we don't talk about that ends up showing out and has an incredible game. I'm not sure who that player is here. I could probably go with a guy like maybe Kendrick Law, the receiving threat from Alabama. Maybe you go for him. Maybe you go for Jamori Macklin, the transfer from UNT, finally standing out at wideout. I'm not sure where Kentucky goes to find a spark here. Maybe he'll just pop up and we're like, oh, there he is. But as of right now, not a lot of star power on the offensive side of the ball to be excited about.
Well, one thing that you can look at, if you look at a path to victory potentially for Kentucky to make a run, there's about 4 runs in the Georgia State game that were explosive. And unless Ole Miss can keep that up, like you talked about, it turns into a rock fight. They drain clock. All of a sudden, it goes from you getting 9 possessions to you getting 7 possessions. And that puts a lot of pressure on somebody like Lane Kiffin, who honestly wants to score a touchdown each and every single play. That's the way he goes. I think Mark Stoops talked about that in his press conference. If Ole Miss can avoid trying to score a 14-point touchdown, if Ole Miss can just stay on the field, because if you go 3 and out and throw 3 passes and give up 15 seconds worth of time of possession in that thing, it could look like the Tennessee game that they had 15 minutes of time of possessions a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Stoops wants to play a rock fight game. He wants ball control. He wants time of possession. He wants to put pressure on the other team by doing that. The way that Ole Miss gets on top of this is by getting the lead early. If you play Kentucky and you get up by 2 touchdowns, it can turn into 4 touchdowns in a hurry. But if you're not careful, you're going to look up and it's the fourth quarter and it's 17-15.
Yeah, this one can get real ugly quick if Kentucky's able to play ball control. And the win last year, they had the ball for almost 40 minutes. They want to. I mean, this is what Kentucky likes to do to essentially any opponent on their schedule. This is not like team specific. All due respect to teams like Ole Miss or some of the higher ranked opponents on Kentucky's schedule this year. Yes, we're going to try and grind this out and make this as dirty as possible to have a chance. But like, this is what Mark Stoops and company love to do, is make it as slow and lethargic and as defensive oriented as possible. Actually, it's funny, like Stoops with his Iowa ties, right? Far too often do I find myself on my show going, hey, by the way, guys, newsflash, we ran it by the stats and info department, and you, in fact, do need to score points to win the football game. It's some volume of points to actually make this a win here. You can't beat Iowa. You have to find a way to go out there and score. So it's not about just holding the ball here for Stoops and company. It's not about playing like Kirk Ferentz in Iowa. It's also finding ways to get into the end zone. Finishing drives is a huge part of this sport, right? Kentucky's got to be able to go out there and actually put it into the end zone in order to have a chance. Because like you mentioned, Ole Miss can, even if they're not out there for terribly wrong, they can score in a hurry. They can tie that thing up like that. You can put together a really difficult, energy draining 7-minute drive. You finally get into the end zone. Oh, look, 4 plays later, Ole Miss is in. You have to go back out on offense. And it's a grind. Far too often, I think, do people talk about, what the defense is doing energy-wise, but they're not talking about what the offense is exuding, especially if that offense is not known for being any sort of anything, any sort of special talent. So I think that's the way Kentucky tries to do it, right? Slow it down. But it's going to come down to whether or not they can actually capitalize on the opportunities that they have. And you mentioned something there. Sorry to go on a tangent. Ole Miss gave up 5 rushing plays of 10-plus yards against Georgia State. 2 of those went for 20. 1 of those went for 40. And if I'm not mistaken, another went for 49. Kentucky would like to have those. That would be awesome. But if they can slow this down a little bit, I think that would be even more important.
Yeah, it's amazing because everybody wants to talk about last year's Ole Miss versus Kentucky game. But if you think about the drive that Kentucky won that game on, it took a miracle 4th down completion down the field and a fumble into the end zone that they recovered. Mm-hmm. But everybody just knows that Kentucky won the game. You don't know how. That was the most Iowa Mark Stoops drive in the history of football. It's like, oh my goodness. Yes, that was an Iowa drive.
Yeah, and they're going to. Would it be nice to win the game and it be like that again? Sure, any way you can get a win here. But if I'm Kentucky, I'm looking to try and again, like I've mentioned several times, I don't know if they're going to be able to do it, but I'm looking to try and play the type of football that you are known for playing. Is kind of grinding this one down to a halt and seeing if Ole Miss makes a mistake. It is also something that's going to be interesting here as to whether or not these teams can stay sound turnover wise as well. You can probably speak a little bit more to, how Simmons is operating as far as keeping the ball clean. I don't trust Kentucky's offense to not cough it up at least once here, whether that be through the air or on the ground. I think they will turn the ball over at least once in this game. How Ole Miss operates on offense, again, you can speak a little bit better to that. But turnovers, I think, could also be a big thing here because if you're talking about field position, let's say Ole Miss finds themselves down 7 in the early in the third quarter, they give Kentucky a short field. Kentucky goes up by 10 or 14. All of a sudden, if this was in the first half, maybe you feel a little bit better about Ole Miss coming back. But now you're worrying about Kentucky draining a quarter or a half a quarter and you not having enough time to get back out there and score. So I think that field position, turnovers, just all the little things here could also fall into play as well.
Yeah, one thing that Kentucky has in their favor is Simmons has had shaky starts to his first scrimmage, his first home start. This is his first road start. This is the first time he's going to have to be dealing with crowd noise and all of that. Against Georgia State, he had 2 first quarter interceptions. There was a play that the backside safety, you didn't even see it. It picked it off. The first one wasn't his fault, but that one, they were going in to score a touchdown. He tried to force a ball. It got picked off. That is an identical thing that happened in the first scrimmage that they had this year. He seems to have trouble with that play at the moment. Now, again, later on in the season, that's not going to be a problem. But right now, while these first are coming through, Kentucky has a chance in the first quarter to get off to a pretty good start, potentially. If Ole Miss can weather that, which I think they can, but if Ole Miss can weather that, I think in the second half will be a situation that Ole Miss kind of pulls away a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to go ahead and get into predictions?
Yeah, whenever we come back, we're going to get into paths to victory and predictions right here on the Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Kentucky podcast. So stick around.
All right, before we wrap up our conversation with Stephen Willis, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. They do the heavy lifting. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and get smart categorization of your spending. Finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege.
All right, we're back in Thunderdome. Let's talk about paths to victory real quick and give our predictions on this game. We'll start with you, Lance, with what's going on. I'm anticipating a 17-14 or something like that.
It's going to be ugly. I mean, Ole Miss may end up winning this game by double figures, and you may look up and go, "Oh, they won by 10, and the final score was 17-7. Awesome, cool. Let's get out of here with a victory." I think this is going to be a little bit of a rock fight. Can Kentucky keep up? I think that is the question offensively. I don't necessarily know if the Rebels are going to. I don't know if the Rebels crack 24 in this game. I don't know if Kentucky cracks 10, to be honest with you, just based on what I was seeing from that offense in week 1. I don't know if they're going to be able to move the ball to much effect against the Rebels. So yeah, path to victory, first and foremost, make this a rock fight. Try and get this as low scoring as possible. Like I mentioned earlier, ground game, ball control, creating a turnover if you can, getting lucky somehow, some way. For those of you out there listening on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, you are probably realizing, oh, this Kentucky guy, he understands this is a much more talented team than what Kentucky currently has to offer. And it's going to take not necessarily a miracle. I mean, ESPN's FPI does give Kentucky like a 16% chance to win this one, but it's going to take some sort of something happening that we don't expect that ends up bouncing Kentucky's way, i.e. a Hail Mary pass that goes for a huge chunk of yards that helps Kentucky win the game a season ago. Does that happen again? Stats and info department ran it by me, said it's probably not going to happen. It's just an unlikely thing to occur. So if you can get this down, I mean, I would take a 6-3 victory here, man. I don't care. Just get it as dirty as possible. We'll see what ends up happening. The thing also, this is super random side note. Kentucky does not have the personnel they had a season ago on offense. As bad as that offense was, they don't have a Gavin Wimsatt. They don't have a backup quarterback that's a dual threat that can run it in. They had that against the Rebels, and that was key for them on a couple of different drives. They don't have that this year. They have Cutter Boley, which if Calzada's playing poorly, you're going to see number 8 a lot in the game, but they don't have those guys that can kind of bail them out in these short yardage situations. So how Ole Miss deals with that will also be interesting. But yeah, as far as paths to victory, we already talked about it. My score prediction here is going to be Ole Miss probably. Yeah, you know what? Forget it. We'll say 13-10. I'll say the Rebels take it there. If we're being realistic, might end up being a little bit more than that. I don't think this is going to be an aesthetically pleasing game. I think it's going to be pretty ugly. Anybody outside of Ole Miss and Kentucky, turn your eyes away from this one because it's going to be some Big Ten football being played down in Lexington, or at least a semblance of it. But yeah, I think that Ole Miss just simply outclasses Kentucky, and it would take some sort of miracle shot in order for the Wildcats to find a way to win this one.
Yeah, and Ole Miss, on the other hand, they need to get up by 2 scores.
Yes.
At some point in the game, get up by 2 scores, because Kentucky, if they have you with one score, that's just one play, and they are really good at making that play, as we saw a year ago. If you go up by 2 scores, all of a sudden it can become 4 scores, and you end up like the South Carolina game last year or something like that. So a quick start, take care of the ball, do not turn over the ball, whether by turnovers, an interception, fumbles, or even turnovers on down. Take field goals when they are available. Remember who you are playing. They're not going to outscore you. You just need to kind of move away like that if you can. I think this game is 24-10 is the direction that I'm going on this game. I think Ole Miss is going to get a 10-point halftime lead, and they're just going to keep it at arm's length in the second half.
I think that's a very fair prediction. Like I mentioned earlier, does Kentucky get over 10? That's the question. If all goes right, Ole Miss, plays a clean game, that's probably what you're looking at here, is a final score in that range. So I don't have any issue with that at all.
So listen, the one thing that makes me weird is that ABC picked up this game. This is like the first conference game of the year. They're going to advertise this, and it makes no sense.
Why is my question. I mean, out of all the different contests that you could use to present the SEC in like a marketable way, who knows? Stephen, we may look at this late Saturday and oh my gosh, Ole Miss won a 41-42 barn burner like they did a few years ago for no reason. Both these offenses just go off and everybody loves it. Maybe the TV markets know something that we don't. But this is not an aesthetically pleasing week 2 game by no means.
All right, Lance Dawe of Locked On Kentucky, Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss. I hope everybody enjoyed this Know Your Enemy show. Lance, tell everybody how to watch your stuff after the game and what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me over on YouTube at Locked On Kentucky. Also, wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter at Locked On UK if you want to hear about me tweeting, or if you want to see me tweeting, complaining about this game on Twitter. I will probably be doing that. It's where you can find all of my stuff. Steven, how about you?
The same thing. You can catch me on YouTube at the Locked On Ole Miss podcast channel. We're also available wherever you get your audio podcasts as well. Give us a subscribe, a comment, a like on that. It helps the show and keeps all of this free. Anyway, Lance, thank you very much for stopping by, and good luck Saturday, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for talking. Really looking forward to it.
All right, that was our conversation with Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Would appreciate it if you guys checked him out. Go give him some support. Like to help out our Locked On hosts here. When I say help out, I mean just be kind. Don't go into his chat saying hateful things. And if you're a Locked On Ole Miss viewer, leave me alone. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, this is going to be a fun game this weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at Lance Dawe _ and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.